Hello and welcome to Punch Drunk Nerd. I am your host this week, Ed Ball, and with me I have Luis Gonzalez and Miguel Sanchez. No, just kidding. There's only me tonight. Miguel is off sick and Luis is busy on jury duty, so for whatever reason I'm here talking to myself and we're gonna have some fun. So if you've been listening to the podcast, I like a good ranking. I reached out to you guys, our listeners, our loyal listeners out there, for some great ideas for top 10s. Granted, I think our only rankings have been Marvel based, so I just want to let everybody know that I acknowledge there's a whole world out there ready to be ranked. So yeah, this is going to be a fun 30 minutes with me, your host, Ed Ball. Punch Drunk Nerd, here we go. Are you ready for a ranking podcast? I am, clearly, because I'm here drinking and doing it instead of hanging out with my partner, Sarah. Cheers. So, the first one we're going to dive into today is the best of movie or TV mustaches. Mustaches, it's not just about a good-looking mustache. It's not about a sexy mustache, though those do definitely come into consideration. But it's also about the character of the mustache. You know, one could wear a mustache, but it could just be a thing on his face. That isn't to say that there aren't some mustaches out there that just fit the character, no matter how good, how bad, how shitty, how creepy. I don't have any pedophiles on my list, so just to note that, but I got some villains in there, because what is a mustache without a good villain behind it, twirling it? So, I'm going to give you my top 5 mustaches, and then I have some great recommendations from some of our loyal listeners that I'll get to right after. Okay, so I would be remiss, and you're going to hear about this movie a lot throughout this little podcast, but I would be remiss if I didn't start off with none other than Captain Hook from, yes, Hook. Yes, none other than by Dustin Hoffman. The iconic mustache has a nice, clean twirl, like a hook, and it even has its own on-screen time during the movie. When Captain Hook hears a ticking, his mustache starts ticking, and is a great embodiment of that mustache for that character in that movie. Also a great movie. Again, I will be mentioning it again throughout this podcast. Second, we all like Daniel Day-Lewis, and that man has worn many mustaches in his movies, and when I say many, I mean 2, and that, of course, is being There Will Be Blood, but I think the winner of the mustache here is Bill Cutting in Gangs of New York. It is such just a well, thick, heavy, kind of greasy-looking mustache, but he's got those little twirls on the end that just kind of make it rock. He wears it well. Number 3, we have David, which of course is Colin Farrell's character in The Lobster. Why did I choose this one? Because it just fits the character so fucking well. If you haven't seen The Lobster, I do implore you to watch it. But Colin Farrell put on a bit of weight for this movie, and he wears a mustache, and it is just so right for the character himself. He's very awkward, very uncomfortable, very unsure of himself. But he rocks a good mustache, does old Colin Farrell. Moving on, I mentioned villainous, also mentioned shitty mustaches, but if it's shitty for the right reasons, then it's a pretty good mustache, which I don't think I can even pull off a shitty one. This one is number 2, Pat Healy from There's Something About Mary. Pat Healy, played by Matt Dillon. Such a piece of shit character, but the mustache, as awful and disgusting as it is, works. It just works. It's a great mustache. It's perfect for the character. So the next one, finally, my number 1, is August Walker, which was Henry Cavill's character of Mission Impossible Fallout. The main reason being is, I've talked about it on this podcast before, you get the old pump. It's not a pump without those lovely mustache running across his face, which of course controversially ruined Justice League. or his appearance in Justice League. But rightfully so, it's a damn good mustache. Henry Cavill, already an attractive man, rocks a fucking mustache. And in that movie, it's great. So would recommend. And he kind of brought sexy back with the mustache when he wore that mustache. So check it out. If you haven't seen it, check all of those out. If you haven't seen it, those are some great mustaches to be checked out in theaters or film, whatever. Most of these movies are no longer in theaters, so you'd be forgiven. A couple of shout-outs. You've, of course, got Anchorman. I mentioned Daniel Day-Lewis's There Will Be Blood, the Daniel Plainview character. That's a great mustache. Basically, Sam Elliott in any movie where he's wearing a mustache. But namely, I would say The Big Lebowski. And then, of course, I've got some shout-outs from you guys. Of course, our most recent guest and loyal listener, Francesco Rivera, came at me with all the best mustaches of 2022. So this is a perfect one. And I did have some of these on my original list, so I saved them for just this. So thank you, Francesco. Good shout. We've got Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner Gordon in The Batman. We've got Miles Teller as Goose's son, Rooster, maybe, in Top Gun Maverick, of course. Aaron Taylor-Johnson in Bullet Train. It is a very good mustache. Sam Rockwell in See How They Run. Also a very good mustache. And then finally, and probably this is the best of the lot, is Chris Evans in The Grey Man, which you can find on Netflix for that jolly good mustache, but that's another good example of a dick with a mustache. That wraps up the mustache top 10s, moving straight on to another one that I've been trying to do for a long time, best sword fights. And again, these categories were chosen by a majority of you loyal listeners. Now, for this one, I'm excluding any lightsaber fights, strictly because it's almost like a category unto its own. I got, again, top 5, because I don't want to prattle on all night, and trust me, I will, if I haven't already bored you to death. Number 5, Maximus versus Tigress of Gaul from Gladiator. If you guys are familiar with this film, if you are not, you should see it, but if you are, you'll know this is the fight towards the center of the film, where Maximus, played by Russell Crowe, fights off against a veteran gladiator in the Colosseum, and this is a fight where they are trying to kill Maximus, and they introduce tigers into the fight. It's a great fucking fight. If you enjoy Gladiator for anything, it's for spectacle, and this is like a spectacle fight. Really good. Very tense. The next two kind of mixed together, but separate in a way. We've got 2 Pirates of the Caribbean sword fights. The first one, I will say, is from the original, The Curse of the Black Pearl, between Jack Sparrow and Will Turner, i.e. Johnny Depp and Orlando Bloom. And this takes place in the blacksmith's shop, which is a lot of fun. Like, talk about physical comedy meeting good staged action. Taking that to the next level was Pirates of the Caribbean 2, Dead Man's Chest, where they have a 3-way fight between Jack, Will, and Norrington. And this takes place towards the end of the film, where the 3 of them are fighting over the key to the Dead Man's Chest. And it basically just takes place all across the island. Somehow they work their way into the island and onto a water wheel, and that rolls down the hill back to the beach. It's great. Again, physical comedy, action, all mixed into one. It's good stuff. And storytelling on top of it. So, that's a really great one. Second to last, or second to best, I would mention this, so I'm mentioning it, is Hook versus Pan from, yes, Hook. This is one of those sword fights where it's basically the moment you've been waiting for. The 2 powers collide. Hook challenging Peter Pan to a one-on-one, mano-a-mano, and it is as spectacular as you think it would be. Anyway, going to our number 1 sword fight is Hector versus Achilles in Troy. And let me tell you, when this is the best thing about that movie, I think most people would probably agree. It is basically what the whole first half of the movie is building up to. And Brad Pitt versus Eric Bana. Yeah, when those two face off, it is incredible. Well worth the wait. There's so much tension building up to the fight, only to when it finally happens, it's like a clash of titans, which is exactly what it should be when it comes to Greek mythology. If you don't want to see Troy, just look up that fight scene because it is incredible. It's like a 2-3 minute fight scene, but it's just hard, brutal. You feel the exhaustion of both men, and the ending result is just doesn't disappoint. It's just a great fucking well choreographed fight. So there you have it. Those are my top 5 sword fights. Moving swiftly on, we have our best villains. Now, this is a tough one because I feel like a lot of people, including Miguel and Luis, will have their own opinions of this, but most people who do have an opinion on this will most often say the same thing. And I guarantee you that the number 1 spot, more often than not, is going to go to Heath Ledger's Joker from The Dark Knight, and rightfully so. It is a great, if not one of the greatest villain roles of all time. I'm not going to include him on this one, not for any disrespect or whatever, RAP, but just to switch it up a little bit and talk about villains maybe we haven't talked about, and probably some that you have. Let's get to it. So, I've got a quick top 10. First off, and a lot of you probably don't know this one, Wilson from the movie Shane. This is a Western from the 60s, maybe 50s. 50s probably correct. This was just like a great Western villain. He's a shooter who comes into town to kill the good guys, and it doesn't disappoint. I would recommend watching Shane. It's the best Western. Next, I've got Blofeld. Which one, you ask? Blofeld from You Only Live Twice, played by Donald Pleasence. Blofeld was played by a lot of actors, but you don't have James Bond without Blofeld, and I feel like Donald Pleasence's performance was the best one as Blofeld. He's got the pussycat and everything. Moving on, there is Marissa Viegler, played by none other than Cate Blanchett. And I wanted to shout this one out because this is from the movie Hannah, which was from 2011. I would recommend that everybody watches this one, especially if you like a good action movie, if you like Saoirse Ronan, if you like Eric Bana, if you like Cate Blanchett. All 4 of them are really great in this film, and some great action scenes, but Cate Blanchett really steals the show as the main villain. You have Hans Landa, of course, played by Christoph Waltz in Inglourious Bastards. Anton Chigurh, also awesome, played by Javier Bardem in No Country for Old Men. One of my absolute favorites is Gary Oldman's turn as Stansfield in Leon, or The Professional. That is one of the most underrated villain roles ever. That is like Gary Oldman in his prime, just doing, like, basically Unleashed. And it's a great, if you want to watch that movie for anything, watch it for Gary Oldman, because he's unforgettable. I would probably be beaten to death by Luis and Miguel if I didn't mention Thanos, played by none other than Josh Brolin in a few Avengers movies, but the main one being Infinity War. Mostly because he's a villain who accomplishes what he sets out to do, which not only in the Marvel universe is that a rare thing, but generally speaking is that a rare thing. So, yes, and he plays it so fucking well. He's a mad titan who is convinced that he's doing the right thing, and he plays that so well, and it's terrifying. Infinity War is like just a whole bubble of tension because of that actor and that character. And moving on, most people like to talk about Darth Vader in this situation, but Darth Vader is redeemed, as we all know, in Return of the Jedi. So, let's go to the core, Darth Sidious, Emperor Palpatine. If you think about it, he's the guy who started it all. If you've watched any Star Wars content, from the Clone Wars to the movies, either the prequels, the sequels, or the middles, whatever we want to call it, he has been allegedly at the center of all of it. But to that point, Ian McDiarmid plays him incredibly well. He has the perfect evil laugh, he has the perfect evil face, and his ambitions are also very evil. And then I've got to mention Captain Hook. Yes, Captain Hook from Hook, because Dustin Hoffman plays that character so fucking well. He's flamboyant, he is evil, he's mean, vengeful, basically all the bad qualities of not only a villain, but he perfectly personifies what you would imagine Captain Hook to be. He's a fop, insecure, he's suicidal, a whole mishmash of things, but when it comes down to it, when it's him versus Peter Pan, it's incredible. And seriously underrated performance, and no person has been able to top that portrayal of Captain Hook since, and that's a fact. And then finally, I think this is an easy one, but I just wanted to shout it out because I had to. It's none other than Nurse Ratched of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest fame, famously played by Louise Fletcher. She's the most detestable character ever put to film. And I think if you've seen it, you'll know exactly what I mean. Anyway, moving swiftly on. So we here at Punch Drunk Nerd like to talk about movies. We do like to talk about games and TV shows. We also like to talk about media of any kind, but we don't really talk about food or drink, even though it's the name of the game as far as drinking. One category that came up that definitely wasn't voted on, but I did it for you, Miguel, if you're listening. You're probably not. But is the cheeses. The sexiest cheeses, mind you. Cheese can be sexy, and I have a top 10 list of sexy cheeses. Number 10, working my way down to 1. I could not do this list if I didn't mention Parmesan, or Parmesan, however you want to say it. Parmigiano, the great accompaniment to any Caesar salad, basically any Italian dish. It's a comfort cheese in many ways. You have a pizza, where's the Parmesan? You have a pasta, where's the Parmesan? It's just a good cheese. You know, I'm not talking about the ones that come in a plastic bottle, though those are just as reassuring as if you were getting it off a block of cheese. So, number 10, Parmesan. It's a part of all of our lives, except it. Number 9 is Manchego, which is like the sexy, hairy chest of cheese. It's kind of savory, rough, but man, it's tasty with some like smoked meat or something. Moving on, provolone. Number 8, provolone. You can get this bitch smoked, but you'll find it on a lot of things, sandwiches, pizzas, but when that shit melts, it's fucking incredible. It is so stringy. It's just delicious, and like on a sandwich, it's great too. Provolone. Number 8. Number 7, blue cheese. I put this on because this is like a weird mistress. It's not everybody likes it, but when you do, you love it. And it goes well with so many things. You could think like burgers, pizzas, salads just by itself, or with some meat, you know. It could be real stinky and sharp, or it could be kind of soft and creamy, but with that little extra tang to it. I'm going to go shout out to my little sister Georgie. St. Pete's Select. That's a Minnesota cheese from Faribault, Minnesota, the caves of. It's a delicious blue cheese. If you haven't tasted it, I would implore you to seek it out if you're a cheese fan. But blue cheese, you know, it's rough, it's dirty, it's stinky, but fucking delicious. Number 6, Gouda. Gouda, for all the same reasons as like blue cheese, but maybe not as intense. It's got this like beautiful smokiness. It's silky. It's soft. Not like soft, but you know what I mean. Anyway, Gouda, delicious. Number 5. Now, like real cheese snobs would probably spit on me for this, but Boursin. I have a box of it right here. Best believe we keep this frequently in our house. It is a Gournay cheese from Normandy. It's a dairy, like a cow cheese. If you haven't tried it, you're an idiot. It's super creamy, super flavorful. Boursin specifically comes with garlic and fine herbs. It goes well, basically just with cheese and crackers. You could have that as the centerpiece to any cheese board, and people will eat it up. My 4-year-old daughter loves it. So, suck it, cheese snobs. Number 4, Chèvre, or goat's cheese. Again, one of those cheeses that can go on most anything. It can come in many forms too. You can add many things to it. You can put balsamic vinegar on it. You can put honey on it. You could go crazy with it. People like to put nuts on it. I don't know about that because I'm allergic, but anyway, it's great. Everybody loves Chev. Number 3, mozzarella. What would Italian food be without mozzarella? It's fucking incredible. It's in the flesh, it's soft, it's squidgy, you can peel it apart, and it's just like this beautiful stringy cheese. You can get cheese sticks out of it, you could get mozzarella sticks out of it, so you fry it, throw it on a fucking piece of fried chicken, and it tastes great. Mozzarella. You couldn't have a cheese list without it. Number 2, it's an extension of mozzarella, but it's slightly sexier because of what's inside. It's burrata. Burrata is a thin outer shell of mozzarella with cheese curdles, creamy cheese curdles on the inside. So when you pop that bitch open, it just oozes out onto whatever you've got. It could be like a caprese salad, it could be a pizza, it could be a pasta. I know I'm just kind of repeating the same fucking things, but I bet you could throw on plenty of other things. But all that to say, burrata is a beautiful cheese and goes well with a lot of things. And finally, this is a personal favorite of mine, and people might disagree, but brie. Number 1, brie. Why brie cheese? Because on the outside, it's this like kind of ugly, off-putting rind that most people think you can't eat, but you actually can eat. It's safe to eat. And on the inside is the most creamy, luscious, soft, spreadable cheese. And once you heat it up, it oozes out. It's something that could go hot or cold, and it's just gorgeous. It's so tasty naturally by itself. You could add literally anything to it, and it would still taste good. You could have it in sandwiches, you could put it on pizzas, you could put it on a cheese board, you can have it, put it on a burger, whatever. Make a baked brie, wrap it in some dough, bake it, throw some jam on there, any kind of jam, any kind of fruit goes with it. Honey, endless array. And for that reason, brie is my top pick. You could just have it cold with a piece of bread. You could just slice it and eat it. The whole rind, too. The rind gives it that little bit of savoriness. Anyway, sexy cheeses. Number 1, brie. Check it out. Coming to a grocery store near you. All right, after cheeses, we're going to go into something heavy. This is a shout-out reference to our dear at Sarah Cortez. Luis might know her, I'm not sure. But the greatest tearjerker moments, who doesn't like a good cry in movies? But I'm just going to go in any order, because there's no way to rank crying to a movie. But here we go. Anyway, so these are just top 10 that quickly come to mind. Coda, recent Best Picture winner of last year. When, I mean, this movie wrecked me as a whole, but when the dad, the deaf father, puts his hands to his daughter to feel her singing, wrecked me. The La Vie en Rose. Non, je ne regrette rien. This is a biopic about Edith Piaf, and it ends with that particular song, which you might be familiar with through Inception, which also stars Marion Cotillard, who played Edith Piaf in La Vie en Rose. Anyway, it is the most stirring ending to a movie. Another one I have 2 suggestions for is Atonement, with Keira Knightley and James McAvoy. This movie came out in 2007, arguably one of the best movie years ever. But yeah, there are 2 scenes in this movie that get me every time. First one is the Dunkirk scene. I'll get to it in a minute, but the music in this is what brings about the emotions. But the Dunkirk scene is a continuous shot that tracks the whole beach of Dunkirk through all of the British soldiers that are encamped there, ready to leave to go back to England. Very beautiful. And the second scene is, at least on the soundtrack, called Denouement, which brings me to the score by Dario Marianelli, which, if you haven't checked that out, he won an Oscar for this movie. But those are 2 very emotional moments in this movie, and I would highly recommend, but it gets me every time. Another one, Children of Men. There are a lot of rough moments in this movie. But one that sticks out to me every time, which was a very intense moment in my youth when I did see this movie in my teenage years, was the first time you hear the baby starts crying for the first time. And there's yet again, another long tracking shot going through this bombed out building, and you're seeing everybody within the building in the midst of all this violence and terror stop only just to listen to this baby crying. And then at the very end of it, the moment she steps out of the building and away from the chaos, does the violence resume as if nothing happened. But for that one very brief, quiet moment, everybody is just embracing the fact that there is a baby alive. It's incredibly moving. Moving on, I'm going to mention it again, fucking Hook. I'll say this about John Williams in any scenario, but the man is the best at saying farewell to an adventure. And I don't know if it's because I'm a father now, but I get emotional every time that we say goodbye to this story. At the very end, the track in particular is called Farewell Neverland. It's just kind of like a beautiful build-up of the kids returning home, the mother finding the kids in their beds, and then Peter returning, and then Wendy coming in for a hug or a squinch. I'm getting emotional thinking about it. And then them bidding farewell to Toodles as he flies off on another adventure. It's just like a perfect moment to which John Williams' score just makes it come to life. It's just an incredible ending. And one I will cherish. Another one, and this one I would basically, I don't know, I might pay somebody money if they just could not cry during this movie, or in particular this scene. Les Miserables, I Dreamed a Dream, the moment, essentially, that got Anne Hathaway her Oscar, and rightfully so. I dare anyone to not shed a tear during this scene, in or out of context, because it is such a raw performance and such a beautiful song. It'll just fucking wreck you. I guarantee it. Then, and we're getting into a little spoiler territory with some deaths. This next one is Pan's Labyrinth, Guillermo del Toro's masterpiece. You heard it here first. Is Ophelia's death, which brings on her return to the fairy realm, or the magical realm, whatever you want to describe it as. She gets shot by her evil stepfather, and who would also be one of the top villains. Just saying that. And upon her death, she wakes up and finds herself returned to, as the lost princess, to her original home, where the king and her mother welcome her back. Perfect ending. Beautiful movie. Check it out. It's incredible. One that I do believe is strongly underrated is the 2005 King Kong, Peter Jackson's King Kong. King Kong's death at the end of that movie, again, spoiler alert, but it's been a long time. That movie gets me every time. It's a long movie, and it's by no means a perfect movie, but goddamn, does that end scene on the Empire State Building get me every time. And I mean, not only have you got Andy Serkis playing the titular character of King Kong, making a desperate last attempt to battle the biplanes that are flying overhead, but Naomi Watts, who should have been nominated for an Oscar that year, did not get nominated for an Oscar that year, is just incredible. Like, her work with Andy Serkis is excellent. It's beyond compare. Moving swiftly on, 2004's Finding Neverland gets me every time. In the scene where Kate Winslet's character is so ill that she can't go and see Peter Pan at the theatre, so J.M. Barrie, played by Johnny Depp, brings the play to her in her living room. And there is a moment where they are watching the play in the living room, and the moment opens up to the rest of Neverland that they have set up, though it's probably part imagination, part, reality. They open up to Neverland in the back garden, and it's just a very surreal, very touching moment. And Kate Winslet plays it perfectly. And it's so moving. It'll get you every time. I guarantee it. And not the only scene in that movie that will get you, I promise you. So if you haven't seen Finding Neverland, check it out. And then lastly, I could have mentioned so many other movies, but it's such a dark rabbit hole. And I'm clearly struggling to get through this list. But Toy Story 3, you guys probably think of the moment that I probably thought of too, but I'm actually thinking of the very last scene where Andy plays with all of the toys one last time to say goodbye with the new girl, Bonnie, I want to say her name is. Anyway, it is such a perfect portrayal of children who grow up and eventually have to say goodbye to their toys, whether literally or metaphorically or whatever. It was such a beautiful moment that I don't think anybody would have expected from a Toy Story movie. Least of all, I'm not like the number one Toy Story fan. I do love the Toy Story films, but this movie will wreck you. If you ever had just like an inkling of a childhood, this movie will get you. And that's how I want to end that list. So thank you, Sarah Cortez, for bringing up all of those emotions. Anyway, moving swiftly on. I asked all our audiences to shout out some lists that they would want to hear. And so aside from the tearjerker one, I'm not going to go into a full top 10, nor even a top 5 for some of these, because it was very impromptu, so I hope you forgive me. But I do have some answers for each one. Worst British accents, which came from, no doubt, my partners who are not here tonight, Miguel and Louise. Worst British accents, 2 come to mind. Everybody would say Dick Van Dyke from Mary Poppins, rightfully so. Everybody knows that one's a bad one. But I would throw out Keanu Reeves in Dracula. It is the most atrocious thing ever recorded, and it really makes you wonder why nobody was just like, why? I get it, he's Keanu Reeves in the 90s, like, why wouldn't you have him? But why would you have him playing a British role? Makes no fucking sense. Like, it's beyond me, and it is terrible. Watch it, but, like, I don't think anybody would pass that as a good accent. And then secondly, as much as I love Amy Adams, she is one of the best, if not the best actresses out there. Good fucking Christ. In American Hustle, there is a part of the movie where she does a British accent, where one could argue it's supposed to sound terrible, but you could also argue it is just a terrible British accent. I hated it. Simple as that. It sticks out like a sore thumb in her otherwise illustrious career. Amy Adams, I love you, but fuck that. It's terrible. So, I had one from our fellow podcasters at the Movie Gap, fellow listeners and podcasters, Chase and Bryce. I'm assuming Chase came up with this one, but this one was an interesting one. Worst sequels that added a child character. It was very specific, and it sounds like you've been hurt, Chase. And I'm going with Chase here because you're the more movie expert. So the first thing I thought of, actually, incidentally, was 3 James Cameron movies. All 3 sequels, and all 3 added children to it, but all 3 didn't bother me a single bit. And they are Aliens. They introduced the character Newt. Avatar 2, The Way of Water, spoiler alert, you meet Jake Sully's kids, and they are kind of the central focus to the story. I thought they were perfectly fine too. They didn't bother me a bit. And then Terminator 2, you meet child Jack Connor, or teenage Jack Connor. John Connor. It's John Connor. And I know some people have said he's annoying, but I think he's perfectly fine. Those are good ones, but bad ones, I had to actually think about this one. And the best 3 that I could come up with, Shrek the Third, only because that's when the Shrek sequels started going bad. Kill Bill Volume 2. And this isn't to say that I think Kill Bill Volume 2 is any less of a movie. It's really not. It's just a very different movie from Kill Bill Volume 1. And for lack of any other ideas, I put this in there only because we meet Uma Thurman's child in it. Is it a bad movie? Absolutely not. So that's a pretty bad example. I apologize. But it came to me, one of the worst sequels that happened to add a child character, arguably, is Indiana Jones The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where they introduced fucking Shia LaBeouf's character Mutt. And I mean, if you've seen that movie, you already know what I'm talking about. But dude, there's a moment where he is swinging through the jungle with monkeys. So that's my answer to the sequel, kids. Thank you very much, Chase, at the Movie Gap, for that question, or that category. Bryce, of the same podcast, came at me with a little bit more of a challenge, which was the best high fives in a movie. I actually had to think about this one because high fives come and go. The first one that came to my mind was the original Top Gun. I have a need for speed. High five. Very masculine. Love it. Another one, Did We Just Become Best Friends? From Step Brothers. And they high five. Borat. High five. Aladdin, Genie, and the carpet have like a secret high five handshake. It was cute, and I don't know, it qualifies as a high five. Calling back T2 Judgment Day, which I just mentioned earlier, but they have a high five in there for some comic relief when John Connor is trying to teach the Terminators some, 90s lingo, and then Dumb and Dumber. Jeff Daniels' character is ripping into Jim Carrey's character about being dumb, and just when he thought he couldn't get any dumber, he totally redeems himself, and they go for a high five and completely botch it, and it's fucking hilarious. Classic. So there you go, Bryce. I hope that satisfies your wants. Just two more categories, folks. I promise I am wrapping this up. Number 9. This is from Lily at Lily and XOXO, which is hug and kiss, I think. Top 10 fruit. I'm going to give you 5 because I'm running long. I'm going to start off with something that I think is underrated, underappreciated, scoffed at needlessly, is raisins, which I know are grapes. So I'm going to throw in grapes too. But grapes, what a refreshment of fruit. And then raisins, nothing is better in a movie than chocolate-covered raisins. They're just like little bursts of sweetness. Like, the fact that so many people hate this is actually, like, a thing for me. Like, I do not understand it. It is beyond bizarre. The fact that so many people have, like, a violent reaction to raisins, it just doesn't make sense. It is a bubble of sweetness. If you bake it, it gets to a bigger bubble, more succulent and juicy. If you don't, it's, again, just like a chewy bit of sweetness. Who gives a fuck? It doesn't look good. It looks like little baby rat turds, but all kinds of food looks like shit, honestly. Let's be real. Anyway, that wasn't like a trigger for me. Peach. Number 4, peach. Peaches are just such a beautiful seasonal fruit. They're very fragrant. They're very tasty. They're juicy. They can go in so many things, and they're just delicious. If anybody has seen Call Me By Your Name, somebody jacks off into a peach. That's how great they are. Then apples. Number 3, apples. Now, my relationship with fruit has been somewhat undermined since I came to this country, because you guys use so many goddamn pesticides. I've become allergic to certain fruits with seeds or stones in them, including peaches, but also apples. I can't enjoy a good apple anymore without my lips and my tongue getting a little itchy. But the apple is like the onion of fruit. Like, it is a staple. It is a pillar to so many greater flavors and or meals or dishes or desserts, however you want to say. The apple standing strong. Second, this is kind of like a sexy fruit. It's pineapple. It's tropical. When you think pineapple, you think something tropical or exotic and super flavorful, super citrusy, very acidic, but super tasty in a lot of things. Pineapple upside down cake is great. Pina coladas, who doesn't like it? Pineapples. And they're fun to cut up. And number 1, strawberries. Who doesn't like a good fucking strawberry? When they're perfect, like super sweet, not too sour, and juicy, it's incredible. You can throw it in any old dessert, you can put them in salads, Strawberries are great, and they're beautiful to look at. Talk about sexy fruit. You could cover it in chocolate. That's great. Who doesn't love strawberries? Thank you at Lily Ann. I hope that was satisfying for you. Lastly, and I'm only mentioning this because I want to shout out to my man, Darian. He wants us to list the worst movies of all time, which I could not do without Luis and Miguel, but also I would have to do so much more research, and frankly, I would have to watch a lot of bad movies again just to get an idea of what I think are the worst movies. But shout out to Darian for bringing that to us. We will do that eventually. Anyway, guys, this was super unnecessary. I did it on a whim, mostly because I love Luis and Miguel and I just want their approval, which I doubt I've earned here. But anyway, I want to thank all of you again for your participation in tonight's episode. Thank you for all your responses, your suggestions. Please keep it up. Please keep following us at Punch Drunk Nerd on all your social media and podcast platforms. And not every episode is going to be like this, I swear to God. Next week, Luis and Miguel will be back. We're going to be talking about our favorite movies of 2022, or shows, whatever, and what we've been into, catching up on news, all of that good stuff that you're used to and would probably prefer to be listening to right now instead of me prattling on about my favorite things, basically. I hope it was entertaining. I love you all, and cheers to you. Have a good night. This is Ed Bull, out.